All right. All right. Well, welcome everyone into our homes. I promise this won't just be me sipping scotch in front of this fireplace, but if you ask, I will do it. We are very excited for this kind of new form of content here. Hopefully we don't run into too many issues along the way, but it is just a glorified conference call. So if you have your bingo card ready, you might be a winner today. We just wanted to take some time to talk about like people that are adjusting to working from home, and some of the people that we have on this call here are all people that have been doing it for a little while, myself excluded. I've only been working from home now permanently for about 4 weeks, I think. So just grab a drink. Feel free to ask us any questions in the chat, and let's go ahead and get rolling. Let's start off with actually everyone kind of introducing themselves. Let's start off with your name, what you do, where you're located. This is actually kind of an interesting call because we're all over the place. And then what your day-to-day, let's say before all of this craziness happened, like what your day-to-day would look like. Let's go ahead and start off with Kevin.
Hey everybody. So my name is Kevin Burke. I'm actually an independent public relations consultant. Burke PR is my company. And I actually have been running my business as an independent out of a home office for about 18 years. So I have actually a lot of experience with this kind of situation. So for me, it's not a whole lot has changed. But everything that I've gone through over the past, 18 years is kind of, come into focus right now. So it's pretty interesting. So.
What about you, Brett?
Yeah, I'm Brett Nordquist, and I've been at Puget Systems about, I guess, almost 8 or 9 years or so. But in 2013, I left the state of Washington and moved my family to southern Utah. And so that's when I began working from home about 7 years ago or so. The work that I do for Puget is I do some writing and write case studies and blog posts. I also work with our customers, collecting feedback about our products and services, and then sending that back to our different product teams, marketing, sales, and support, so that we kind of know what we should be selling and things that matter most to our customers.
Right on. What about you, Mike?
So my name is Mike Pecci. I am a film director, commercial producer, photographer. And this world really isn't any different for me. Like being a freelancer in general, you kind of have to work from home all the time. You kind of have to make your own schedule. And you kind of have to set your own goals. Which has been something that I've been doing for about 18, 19 years. The difference now, I think, is that everybody else is in lockdown. So, for instance, I'm actually color grading. So I'm working with a colorist remotely this afternoon. And normally what would happen is that I would be able to sit in the room with that colorist and sort of skip past a lot of the back and forth. But I literally show you my email chain, which is like 45 deep. And it's just this slow, stupid communication that's going on that's taking stuff so much longer than it normally would when you're just able to be with people and hang out with people.
Yeah.
Our business is very much a social business as far as like interacting with creatives and then shooting people, filming people, and creating content. So right now, our industry is in a rough place because freelancers obviously are not getting any work. Freelancers aren't on payroll. So we're kind of digging into our savings, and we're kind of trying to make sure that we're getting through this thing.
Sure.
But the positive spin on the whole deal is that finally we have time to tackle all these projects that have been consistently eluding us because we have to work for clients like you, Eric. So
I like that you put the have to on there. I'm gonna pretend that one didn't cut deep a little bit. Yeah.
No, but it's actually been interesting, and I also run a podcast, and we've been doing episodes like this on the show, where I'm talking to different creatives and actors and stuff, and It's a fascinating time creatively because everybody's sort of hunkering down and coming up with new ideas and sort of gestating stuff, which is really interesting. But let's talk, in 3 months from now, and see see what the mood is then.
Sure. I realize I absolutely skipped myself here. So I'm Eric. I'm the marketing manager here at Puget Systems. My days before tended to be a lot of phone calls, meetings, lots of like in-person, face-to-face coordination. 2 weeks from now would have been NAB, which would have been our absolute biggest show of the year. So it's definitely from being in marketing, it's kind of flipped everything on its head a little bit. But what I am excited about is that it has kind of put us in a position where it forces us to kind of create different forms of content and innovate. I mean, this is the first time that we've done something like this. And then we're kind of doing the same thing of ramping up the podcast right now. So I'm excited. It's definitely a taxing time, but I'm still excited for it. I'm excited to see kind of how we're going to come out the other side of it. So for all three of you, you guys have kind of you've been working remotely for a long time now. So I actually just for a second want to like ignore coronavirus and let's look at when you first started making that transition to working from home and what was the toughest part about that transition? If you could pick like one thing, what was the toughest part about that transition for you guys? We'll go in opposite order this time. We'll go Mike first.
Really, it's funny because I've been doing it for so long at this point. I try to remember what my real job used to be, as I call it. Like, what was my real job at one point? I think the most difficult thing was processing the anxiety that there isn't stability and that you don't have a boss necessarily. Like you're kind of your own boss. So like back when before I did this stuff, I used to work as a car mechanic and an airplane mechanic. And so you would just punch in. You go to work, you punch in, and you'd have a list of things that you needed to get done and go from there. It took me quite some time to structure my life in a way where I was combating that anxiety, but also giving myself monthly, weekly, and hourly structure so that way I could get through what I needed to get through and feel a sense of accomplishment. And without my to-do lists, which I have like a yearly to-do list, and then it just sort of filters down to the day. Without those, it's so easy to get lost when you're in an atmosphere like this because as you saw, my girlfriend will walk through and ask me 100 questions. Someone will knock on the door and I'll have to deal with something. There's so many different distractions.
Sure.
As someone that works from home. So the trick, I think, to being successful from my perspective is just treating it like a job, giving yourself a to-do list, an accurate to-do list, and then try not to feel that anxiety because that anxiety kind of kills a lot of people. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. What about you, Brett?
Yeah, I left Puget, but I was still, working for the company. It was just, 1,000 miles away. So the thing that was the hardest for me by far, this is an easy thing to answer, was just the connection to my coworkers. We talk about like, you can now like miss meetings or you don't have to attend as many. There's people not distracting you throughout the day, but you forget like that becomes part of your social fabric. Those were good friends that I made. And to suddenly, this was before we have some communication platforms in place now, like Slack, that make it easier to contact. But to go from coming into the office, I'm a fairly social person, being able to, rub elbows with coworkers and get feedback on your work, just little things like that. It went from having that to none. That was by far the most difficult part for me. Like Mike said, just the prioritizing, that would kind of happen naturally when I was in the office. And now all of a sudden I'm home and I'm looking at a task list and I'm thinking, man, I wish I had somebody, to helped me kind of sort through this stuff. So just the isolation, the lack of being able to see coworkers day to day was the hardest thing for me initially. It still is today, but it was really difficult the first 6 months or so.
Yeah, I could totally see that. I think one of the things that I've found is like I'll find myself holding myself back from communicating to people because I feel like it's over communicating to them, where in reality, like once you're working remotely, even when you feel like you're over communicating with them, it tends to be that you're under communicating with them. It just takes so much more of that communication to actually make things happen.
Yeah, that's so true. You don't want to bother people, but yet, even today when I was, trying to get some work done, someone contacted me and needed some edits, and it's just a nice break. And even if it's just a few minutes of a chat back and forth, that adds something that, that I was used to having in the office each day.
Yep. Was there actually back to you, Mike? Was there anything kind of like jarring for you when you went from, because when you were still out there in Boston, you went into the studio every day, and then you came out to LA, and that's where you started kind of working remotely. Like, what was the most jarring for you?
I think getting up and going to the studio back in Boston was a healthy thing, because it would force you, A, to get out of bed at a specific time, B, to make sure that you were dressed.
Sure.
You were social.
Don't stand up, Mike.
Yeah. To make sure that you were social. But also, you're bumping into people. And so, like, you would bump into people that would be in the building, you would bump into real life, and a lot of that really was helpful. And moving here, so we moved here right before coronavirus. So we moved to a whole new city, started to network hard in the city, thankfully, for the first couple months that we were here. But now we're secluded from all that sort of networking and exchange. Before what happened, we would just take meetings. So it really isn't a tough thing to be working from home in our business, because we still have to exchange with folks. So like, if I want to go meet with a wardrobe person, if I want to go meet with an actor, if I want to go meet with a producer, we would just take these meetings and go from place to place and make sure that we were interacting with people. I think that eventually, once we come out of the back end of everything that's happening, eventually I will get an office, eventually I'll get a shooting space, and eventually I'll have that, because I think that being able to leave your home is really important. And if you can't leave your home, then actually having a designated office that you literally just go in there to do work on. And back in Watertown, I don't think you were at a place in Boston, but we had a third floor that we were using as an office for a while. And I would literally just go up those stairs only to work, and then come down there for lunch breaks or that. So I think your brain just needs that separation. Because otherwise, if you're, editing in your bedroom, you're just like rolling out of bed, and then you're working at like 3 a.m. when your clients are texting you.
Yeah, for the first couple of weeks, I kept finding myself, especially because, long story short, I was confined to this room right here. And so I kept finding myself, like, even after I was done working, my desk was just right here. So I could easily just find myself just rolling right over, and then, okay, I guess what else am I doing? My desk is right here. I'll just go work. And so, like, I definitely saw my work-life balance starting to get really unbalanced toward the work side.
Welcome to freelance, man. I mean,
yeah, right.
The problem with freelance is that, especially if you're a subcontractor, oftentimes you're dealing with your clients that are getting to you after their day. So normally a client is like dealing with whatever they've got to deal with at their office, do all this sort of stuff. And so sometimes you're getting notes from them at like 5 p.m. Or sometimes you're getting notes from them when they get home after they've fed their kids and they do this whole process. And then you'll get emails and texts at like 9 p.m. at night.
Yeah.
And so as a freelancer, it's important that you set your boundaries with your clients. Because when I was younger, I used to just respond. And so then what happens is you're just beholden, and you're just like, oh, okay, hold on. And so it doesn't matter what you're doing. And if you're in that space, you just sort of turn into it and you start working and you become really panicked. Yeah. You got to set the rules. You got to tell got to tell the Erics out there when they can respond.
A little bit of a theme coming out here.
You're actually great, Eric. I'm just kidding.
All right, Kevin, what
This
about
is
you?
really an intervention here. This is,
I know, it feels that way.
Oh,
What you, Kevin?
so going back to the original question, like what was most jarring for me? I was going from corporate to my basement office, and I think and I remember it vividly. It was this, and Mike kind of pointed to it. It was like structure. There was this structure that existed in my corporate world that was suddenly gone, and so my first instinct was, well, I need to recreate that structure. I need to basically duplicate what I had into what I have now, and sort of make that work. And I would do silly things like, I had my desk and I would put an office phone. So this was like 18 years ago. So it's like I had my office phone and it was a separate line. And, I set myself up like I was in my office. But what was so startling was there were these gaps in my days, because I realized, well, when I was in the office, I was in meetings all day. I actually wasn't working. I was in meetings all day, every day. And then suddenly I wasn't. So what I realized was, instead of, trying to replicate this structure, which was only relevant to that situation, I suddenly realized that my productivity like exponentially went through the roof, because I had all of this time and I could sort of redesign and rethink, what my days looked like. But from the very beginning, I remember that so well, just trying to replicate that, and being astonished at the silence, because there was no meetings, there was nothing going on.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've felt on my end as well. And it has definitely exposed the level of important, like we would find reason. It almost feels like we would just find reasons to have meetings just because we're all there. Hey, let's just get together and talk this through. And what I've really appreciated that this has forced is more intentionality behind things.
Exactly.
Like it has put everyone in this position where it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to put this Zoom call together with all of these people, I need to have all of this information lined up. Whereas like I feel like beforehand, a lot of people would just kind of come into that room and it's like, well, hey, let's figure out all that stuff that I should have brought ahead of time. Let's just figure that out while we're in the meeting. So that's
absolutely.
I've appreciated.
Yeah, it really makes you completely rethink your time, and you think of your day as in like little blocks of time, and how am I going to use those blocks, and what's productive and what's not productive, and you start to rethink things like meetings. And like, is that absolutely necessary? Does that help me get to my objective at the end of the day or at the end of the week? And it changes your perspective on things, and changes how you organize your calendar.
Totally agree. Okay, so now that we've addressed kind of like how things, what our days would normally look like, let's address the elephant in the room here. Let's talk about like the impacts that coronavirus has had. I know you guys have kind of touched on it a little bit here and there, but like what impacts has that had specifically to you guys, and what your day-to-day what does your day-to-day now look like given that impact, I guess? Let's go back around to Mike, actually.
Honestly, all right. There's a couple of different aspects of it. Like, for me right now, what I'm doing is I've got 2 movies that are in pre-production. And one of them is Who's There, which you had worked with us on, Eric.
Yeah.
So literally I got to years of work. So it was like 5 years, whatever it's been, 5 years of work, 5 years of prep on this thing. Literally got to 4 days before Corona hit. And the producers were like, we love it, let's make it. And then Corona hit. So everything has been put on hold. Financing is put on hold. Casting, all that stuff is just been put on hold. And in our business right now, in the film business, we just heard that productions aren't going to start until maybe July, probably not till August. And so as freelancers and as crew people, we're out of work until August, realistically. The other big issue with us, I mean, the big change in my life is gonna be the lack of income, because what we do as freelancers is you try to stack your work. So I will spend 5 or 6 months before a job even happens, just nurturing a job and putting a job together and having these conversations and putting it in the client's ears. And then it oftentimes doesn't take 5 or 6 months until that job happens. And one thing that I learned younger is that I used to get a gig, I'd get cash and be like, great, I'm gonna take some time, I'm gonna do some of my personal stuff, I'm gonna go on vacation, I'm gonna do something. If I take a month off from doing that pre-prep on jobs and lining up that work, I have to wait like an additional 3 months in the back end. So I have to be prepared not to work for at least 3 months after. So being in this position now where everything's basically on hold, so any of my clients that I talk to about work, or I'll reach out to them and talk to them about projects, most of my clients are in panic mode as humans right now. So they're trying to decide whether or not they are going to have an Easter and how they're going to handle the fact that their kids are home all the time and what their life is like. No one wants to talk about work. Luckily, there are a couple jobs that I'm wrapping up, which is keeping us going, but that'll be done in like 2 weeks. And so the difficulty in our industry right now is that the reality of it is a lot of people in the freelance world that haven't prepared are going to go out of business because of the lack of income that's going to be coming in. And we're going through the process right now of actually trying to apply for unemployment, which normally as a freelancer you can't do if you're a 1099er because you're not paying into unemployment. But apparently, according to our fearless leader, freelancers are maybe going to be able to get unemployment. So I mean, ultimately, that's the big change. Other than that, my daily schedule is the same. Like
Sure.
me doing all my prep and me doing all my stuff and me having all my schedule. It's nice because it's all the same. It's just that all these ideas and prep stuff that I'm doing can't come to fruition. And then you have to beg the question, because our industry is a support industry. So we're there to support businesses, whether we're making commercials, we're there to support advertising. If the economy is crap in the back end, we're the first ones to get cut. Freelancers are the first ones to go. So I'm not necessarily too freaked out about it, because what are you going to do? But
Sure.
I think that our industry is definitely dealing with that.
But I would argue that you're also kind of taking steps to combat that, though. Like with your podcast and all that. So that was going to be my follow-up question, is like, so what do you do? Because I don't think it's, I wouldn't just tell people like, hey, like this is what it is and let's not do anything about it. So like,
no. There's definitely a positive spin on it. I think that what you have to do is if you're a storyteller, you have to actually look at what's happening right now, which is everybody is looking to escape. No one wants to deal with this reality. So most people are binging. Most people are watching shit on Netflix. They're going through all this content, and they need stuff to do. We just found out this week that our podcast this week has done the best that it has ever done in 2 years of being up, which is incredibly fascinating, because statistics are saying that podcasts are down 20%. I'm not kidding. Ours is literally skyrocketed.
does that directly correlate to people's commute time?
That's what the theory was. The theory was that most people only listened to it when they went to work or drove to work. but I don't know what that means about like maybe people listen to me when they shower. You know what I mean?
All right, man. I feel like you're calling me out again. Stop.
How did you know?
So before we jump to you, Brett, I do want to pause for a second. And Houston, do we have any questions in the chat or anything to address? Sounds good. Let's keep rolling then. Brett, what you got?
Well, and after listening to Mike, that's a bit of a reality check, and hard to hear. And again, I feel pretty privileged in that my work, in terms of what I do, has changed, but I still have work to do, and for that I feel very blessed. A good chunk of my work was, events, Eric, with you, and visiting clients, and clearly that's on hold for right now. But there's a lot of projects, as Mike mentioned, that like you put on the back burner, and now this is the time that I can do things that I otherwise would have a hard time justifying. But yeah, I mean, listening to Mike, I mean, that's hard. That's heartbreaking. I mean,
Oh, come on,
that's hard to hear.
I don't want to be the downer here, man. I don't wanna be the downer here,
I can feel Mike getting uncomfortable being the sob story here.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, you gotta hit him with the tears first.
There's and not just that, Mike, but knowing that that's the situation that a lot of our customers are in. A lot of my job is calling customers, and I hear similar stories to what Mike said. The first couple of weeks, people, you're right, Mike, they didn't want to talk about work. They were trying to line up childcare. All of a sudden, their children are home. They're trying to do online school. They're trying to just keep their household, not knowing if they're going to receive a paycheck in the next 2 weeks. So the last thing they wanted to hear was, selling them on a new workstation. So it's taken a different approach. I think I've mentioned a couple of times to my coworkers that I feel like I'm as much a counselor as I am, an employee, and just trying to understand and have compassion for people that are in these situations that are directly affected by Corona. But myself, I feel I won't be complaining, because there's people that have it a lot worse than what I've had it so far.
I mean, look at your situation right there, man. You get to hang out with that dinosaur.
With the dinosaur. The dinosaur and the lava lamp. I mean, life's got to be good, right, Mike?
Yeah, man.
I love how every single call, Brett and I are on a lot of calls together, and every single call, that thing is there, and he gets called out every single time, and somehow it is still there.
It's still there. I have a 7-year-old that makes sure that it's there every morning when he goes off to school.
Yeah, no, I do agree with a lot of what you're saying there, Brett. I think that kind of coronavirus, this whole thing has brought a lot of clarity to a lot of people. I mean, like here, like not to, I mean, I guess I'll just shamelessly plug Puget Systems here. Like we, our goal has always been to like help people, like whatever the case may be, whether it's through their work or something else. Like we want to provide additional value to them. And right now we recognize the fact that that's not through workstations. It's through doing stuff like this and just having conversations, just being empathetic and all that. So I think it does bring clarity to everyone's mission, why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you, Kevin?
Oh, no, I mean, absolutely. I think, it's an interesting time because, I think we're going to see, I think, a lot of sort of new disruptive ideas, and this is giving a lot of people a lot of time to think. A lot, they're looking at the obstacles in front of them, and some people will say, "Oh, this is insurmountable. I don't know what to do." But there's a lot of people who are going to look at this and say, "We need to get through this, and so we need to figure out something new." And if it's storytellers and delivering stories, well, you know what? People, like you said, Mike, people now more than ever, people need escapism. They need, they need that kind of stuff. So, well, let's figure out something else. Let's figure out another way to tell those stories or to share those stories. So I think it's a really interesting time, because the optimist in me says, we're going to get through this. We're going to come out the other side. But I think, the really, there's a lot of smart people out there who are using this time to think about, how can we do things different? How can we do things better? So, I'm, like I said, I'm optimistic that, yeah, there's another side to this. And I'm really curious to see what things are going to look like, what, people like us are going to, do with this opportunity, to, help people through it, and maybe even create something new on the other side of this that, we never would have imagined was possible, because we never had the opportunity to take some time and think about it and rethink things. So yeah, there's a lot of harsh realities that people are facing, but I think there's also, that opportunity to be seized. So, I'm optimistic.
I totally agree. I mean, I don't think that if this hadn't have happened, that we would have told ourselves, hey, let's do a Zoom call and live stream it over YouTube.
Well, and let's bring it back to, working at home. How many companies have said to their employees, no, it's impossible. Of course you can't work from home. You need to be in the office, because that's the way it is. And, but then all of a sudden, when you're faced with, you don't have a choice, so figure it out. And guess what? They figured it out, and they're doing it. So nothing's impossible. It's perception, it's priorities, and it's decision making, and and you can make it work.
It's no strange thing that, I don't know if you guys have noticed that besides grocery stores being sold out of toilet paper and paper towels for whatever reason,
Makes sense.
Don't do the math.
Love that shit. But besides that, grocery stores are sold out of yeast. They're sold out of flour. You have such a huge group of folks that are going back to working with their hands, especially out here in Los Angeles. And I know it's the same in a lot of other cities now, where restaurants are closed. You can't go out to eat. And if you're going to order in food, if you're going to order in takeout, you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be at least 50 minutes. So all your takeout food is just gross. Most of it's just takeout crap. And so, like, if you want a good meal between now and, whatever it is, July, like if you want a good meal, you got to figure out how to make it yourself. And I think there's been this influx of people with all this time on their hands now, sort of going, I want to learn how to make sourdough. I want to learn how to actually use my hands to create things again, which I think is really inspiring and really kind of cool to watch folks that would normally have claimed to be bogged down by their 9 to 5. Like whenever I used to do corporate videos and I go into offices and work with execs and film them, I used to laugh about it. I'd go into a space and I'd hang out with an exec, and this is some guy that, like, he's got like a Mercedes out front, he's got like a yacht and a boat. And he'd hang out with this guy and he's just like, I'm so envious of your life. And I'm like, dude, you have made literally in like the past month more money than I've made in the past 2 years. So I don't understand your dilemma here. And it's always this grass is greener kind of thing from both sides of the fence. And the thing that's really fascinating right now, and I think the only thing that keeps me sane, is that everybody on the planet is literally doing the same thing right now. Like, everybody is locked up in their spaces, having to confront what they do for work, having to confront how they handle their life, confronting what they prioritize, and then confronting what their future is going to be. We're all doing it. No one's getting ahead other than the toilet paper manufacturers. So it's a fascinating thing, and seeing this, and through the podcast, we've been getting a lot of this response. Seeing this with people who are looking to fill their time with betterment, because how many times would you sit there and go, look, if I had free time, if I had 2 weeks off from work, if I had a month off from work, what would I do? And now everybody has that forced scenario. And at the beginning for folks, it was kind of shocking, I think, because it's just like the stress and the anxiety sort of confronts you. But I think week 3, after you binged every show that you've ever wanted to watch on Netflix.
You've watched all of Netflix.
Yeah. And you're staring at that brick wall and you're like, well, what? I now have this time. And what they're confronting is what we confront as freelancers earlier in our career, where we actually make that decision and we jump off the ledge and say, look, I can't rely on anything. I've got this vision, I've got this dream, I've got this thing that I want to do. How do I confront and how do I fill my time? And everybody here has said the same thing, that adjustment's been really difficult and you're trying to get out of that work structure and that work system. I remember specifically, I would go to work to wait to hear from clients. And sometimes I wouldn't hear from my clients, like especially in the summertime in the East Coast, like June, July, and August. Clients are like on vacation, clients are on the beach. And I would literally just go to the office and stare at my computer and wait for people to get back to me, wait for stuff to happen. And my life was it was full of anxiety, full of stress because of that. And it took a couple years for me to realize, like, what is the difference between me waiting in the office and staring at a computer or me sitting on a beach and waiting for a phone call? The difference is in my life structure that I've set up for myself, I can do that. I can do that and not feel guilty because I've saved money and because I've got my thing set up and I don't have a boss breathing down my neck trying to prove to his boss that his job is worth something by coming into my office and giving me shit. So I can sit on the beach, and when I get my phone call, I'm gonna go do my job, but I can change my life and how I wait for my work and how I process my work based upon happiness. And it becomes more than what, I won't get too deep into this, but it becomes more than what our capitalist society has been selling to us. And it becomes almost more European to a certain extent, where our lives are like, we have siestas and we have these abilities to sort of not have what we do as a job be the central gravity for everything that happens in our fucking lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, I think because I think about a lot about that too, and you know, kind of growing up in the in the 90s and sort of the agency and corporate world where work-life balance was, you know, all the rage. Everybody talked about, oh, we have to achieve work-life balance. And all they did was talk about it. They didn't, you know, it was like this nebulous thing, that this holy grail. But if we talk about it, maybe you can achieve it. But I think it was, you know, working from home and you know, being on my own, where I realized that, you know, it's not work-life balance. It's balance. You know, it's life, and it's about priorities, and it's about decision making. And you know, nobody can make decisions for you, and nobody can set your priorities for you. You can do that yourself. And kind of when you get to when you get to a comfort level with deciding that, you know what, I can set my priorities. Some of them are going to be work, some of them are going to be personal, like you said, Mike, so beautifully. Like, you know, I can sit in my office and stare at the screen for an hour or 2 hours and waiting for something to happen. Is that working? No. Or could you be sitting on a beach, but you're still plugged in, you're still ready to respond and ready to, you know, it's intermingled, it's balanced within your life. And at the end of the day, you don't feel like, oh, what a wasted day. No, more like, you know what, I got everything done that I wanted to do. I got my work done. I took care of my family. I took care of my personal health, like my mental health. I took a break. You got it all done because you prioritized it, and not because you separated it, but it blends. And I think that was the biggest epiphany for me in figuring out this whole balance thing. So it's interesting that you said that.
Yeah, I do want to dive into like that kind of like future thinking a little bit more, but I also do want to wrap up like the like adjusting to working from home side of things. And then we can kind of talk about like what impacts this will have on the future. But so like if you could just pick one thing that is the like one piece of advice that you would give to someone who's, and we've kind of touched on this in little pieces here and there, but one thing that you can tell someone who is like, he is starting to work from home on Monday next week, like what's the one thing that you would tell that person? Let's start over with you, Brett.
I would, the first thing the thing I would tell them would be to focus on the project and not the hours spent. It was a big change. I also came from several corporate jobs with bosses who had the butts in seats mentality. And if you weren't in your office in your seat, you weren't getting work done. And so, yeah, that took a while to figure out something that would take me 2 or 3 weeks in the office because of meetings and interruptions may take just several days. So to, again, focus on the hours. What's the old adage that like work expands to fill the time allotted? Yep. And when you're in an office, you have 40 hours, each week, and the work tends to fill whatever hours you're scheduled for. Well, now that you're home, that work, as it starts to expand, infringes upon time with your family, time with your friends. So that would be mine. Focus on the project, focus on what you want to get done, not necessarily how many hours it took you to get the same task done in your office job.
Yeah, and I think it's easier. It might sound like a kind of a messed up thing to say, but it's almost easier to make that decision about giving up your work-life balance when you're in the office, because there's that degree of separation between like you and your family. But yeah, when you're here working from home and you can hear them upstairs, or you can actually like go up and have lunch with them, you're like actually you're around them the whole time that you're working on these other projects, and so it actually feels as though like you can directly see like the faster I get this done, the faster I'm up there with them. Whereas it doesn't necessarily feel the same way when you're out there at the office.
Yeah, it takes a while to get used to that too. For the first maybe year or so, I thought, wow, like what I'm used to take 50 hours, it takes, 25 or 30 now, like it almost can feel like you're cheating your employer. But then you realize your employer cares what your output is. They care that you're delivering quality work. Yep. They don't give a damn how many hours it took you. And if you have a boss that worries about that, you should probably
you're in one place.
Something else. Like that won't end well, or they won't be someone that will get on board with working from home. So yeah, I agree.
Great point.
Yeah. What about you, Mike?
Well, I'll come at it from a freelancer side. I would say that if you find yourself in the boat that we're all in right now, and you're like, I think it's very easy to lose direction, especially if you don't have specific jobs. If you're someone that has had a consistent amount of work, and that work has been the driving force of your career for the past whatever years, and you find yourself in this scenario, we don't know ultimately what the back end is going to be. We don't know what people are going to be interested in. We don't understand what advertising is going to be. If you read articles right now, all the influencers are actually getting a lot of backlash right now, and they're saying that this is the death of influencers and all that sort of thing is happening. I would just say, and I say this on the show, take this time to learn new things. Take this time to actually learn how to edit. Take this time to learn how to use Photoshop correctly. Take this time to learn new skills. And if you're smart, you're probably going to do some sort of like social online skills, because this isn't going anywhere. Now that everybody's into this, this will be a thing that sticks around. So learn these new techniques, so that way when the doors are open and we all step out into the fresh air, everybody's going to be hungry. Everybody's going to be running for that pile because they need to. The desperation's there. It'd be nicer to have new skills, to have a new trajectory, to have more things in your toolbox that can earn you cash. And if you waste this time and you don't teach yourself those things, then in the back end, that change could change your business drastically. That change could change who you are. So if you want to feel any sort of anxiety and fear, don't waste this time. Like actually spend your days teaching yourself new things and trying new things and learning.
I like that. Yeah. I think there's a lot of people that would probably push back against that, just saying like, well, I'm just trying to like deal with the stress and anxiety side of like everything that's going on. But I think my argument against that would just be that like, well, hell, that's a good distraction.
My argument against that would be, hey, I'll see you later. Because the truth of the matter is, in the freelance world, it's cutthroat.
Sure.
You're either on board or you're not on board, and like you want to be as helpful as you possibly can to your fellow freelancers and fellow creatives. And you know that I'm all about that, but there hits this point where it's like it's depression. So you can either fall into this depressive mode, and you can fall into this bad stuff. Look at me editing myself. Then this bad stuff.
I'm proud. I'm impressed.
And on a bit of a tangent here, one thing that I tell people all the time on the show is that do yourself a favor. When you wake up first thing in the morning, don't pick up your cell phone and do not type in to Google COVID news. Do not look at that stuff first thing in the morning. Do not let all of that insane fear and that insane manipulation that is going on control how your day goes. Because if you had a 9 to 5, you wouldn't be able to be sitting there looking at that stuff. Your boss would come in and give you a hard time. So you don't do that on your own time. Spend that time, wake up in the morning, have good, healthy habits. Set yourself on a regular sleep schedule. Don't do the 48-hour Sex and the City 3-season binge watch. Like actually put yourself on a solid schedule.
That was oddly specific, Mike.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You should be binge watching Succession, if any shows.
But seriously, if you set healthy habits for yourself and you make sure that you're following through these routines and following through these habits, if we were only locked in our place for 3 weeks, okay, whatever. But 2 months from now, these unhealthy habits are really going to kick in on you. And one of the healthiest things that you can do is teach yourself new things and actually keep your brain running and rolling. And so if you give yourself a list and be like, I'm going to become successful at this program, and these are relevant to computer stuff. To be successful at this program, I'm going to learn this thing. I'm going to learn how to do 3D animation. I'm going to learn how to use this stuff as a director, because then I can better communicate to the people that I hire, because I know how long it takes to render out something. Just build those things. It'll keep you sane. And it'll keep you from becoming depressed. And it'll actually trigger those other chemicals in your brain where you're like, wow, what did I do today? I actually made this. This is really good. I didn't leave the house today. I smell terrible, but I made this really cool thing. That's what I did. You know? So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's again, like doing this right here is not something I think the issue that a lot of people have is that they're expecting things to go back to normal. And I think that's all the more reason that we need to be learning these new skills like out of necessity in like this environment is because 50% of the environment we're in now, I think, is going to still exist after. So if you aren't learning these new skills now, you're going to be screwed when that time comes.
Yeah, dude, they're talking about, without getting too deep into it, they're talking about this being seasonal. They're talking about this happening consistently until they come up with some sort of vaccine.
Yeah.
Everything that they're doing and all the stuff that they're telling us about is ultimately to try to control us as a populace and keep us in a spot right now, for safety reasons. But, it's going to be like the cold, where like come September, they're going to be like, well, guess who's back?
Yeah. Did you get your corona shot this year?
Yeah. Yeah. So
it's the new flu shot. But yeah, I mean, you raise a lot of great points, Mike. And I think there's some stoic expressions and sayings and, things like, you can't control the events around you, but you can control how you respond to them and how you react to them. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to that. And kind of to your point about, do you get sucked into the headlines and the news and the fear mongering and all that, or do you accept this as fact? This is happening around me, so what am I going to do about it? because that part I can control. And, Eric, talking about, well, I can learn new skills. I can expand my repertoire. I can explore new ideas. I mean, every day I get up and I have a cup of coffee and I think through some things, but I have these mantras, and a couple of them, some of them are like inspired by like people like Gary Vee, who say things like, how do you get through this? And I think it's, positivity, it's perspective, it's and it's innovation. You have a positive mindset. Don't get sucked into, all of the fear. You have perspective, right? It's like, hey, I'm healthy, I'm strong, I'm okay now. So, I'm able, I'm capable. And it are those who are able to innovate and come up with new ideas and new, like we're doing right now. Like, what a great way to engage, not just with each other, but with, larger audiences. We never would have done this before, but, we were forced to think we got to do something different, and we did it. But we needed that little push. And, the other sort of mantra that I have in my head is, actions express priorities, right? So you have your priorities, and this kind of goes back to freelancing and working from home and being an independent. It's like, have your priorities, set your priorities, and then act on those. And, if your priorities are clear within this new context in which we're working, you can succeed on many levels, personally and professionally. It's like, so.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, kind of like what I was saying earlier. I mean, I think that a lot of people, I think this is forcing a lot of people to find clarity as to what those priorities are, which
Exactly.
I'm hoping when we come out the other side of this will be better for everyone, because then that'll define those actions and how to move forward based upon those priorities, instead of the priorities that they had in their head that was actually someone else's priorities,
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So getting to that, I definitely want to like wrap things up on a more positive note here. So, like, how do you guys think things will be permanently changed for the better as we come out of this? Let's go back around to you, Brett.
Well, this is less work specific, but I do think you're seeing like investment being made into online learning. I have, kids in 3 different schools. Some of them have handled things really well. Things have like gone off without, too many changes, and others that didn't invest in the technology, getting, groups online, getting classwork online, video conferencing squared away before this happened, are now scrambling to make that happen. So in a bigger picture, I think you're seeing it too with some businesses that are having to adapt to that. Restaurants that had apps, that people could easily order from, that were on DoorDash. So some of those that are able to stay in business that had made those investments beforehand. So that's what I'm kind of hoping. I'm, when a child misses school and there's really no way to like get that back, some of the technologies that are putting in place now, recording, teachers' presentations and lectures and stuff, I think that'll pay dividends down the road. So those are kind of some of the changes, small changes that I'm seeing, it's hard and it's expensive to plan for this. And now as companies are being forced into it, and along with that, just the mentality, I think it was Mike or Kevin that said, when they started working from home, it maybe wasn't as acceptable. You had to sell your manager on it. Now that companies can see that they are people that can get their work done, and maybe even in a better environment, that may open up opportunities for people outside of just us.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you're saying. Like, from a video conferencing standpoint, I would argue that I've had better relationship building experiences over this past month than I did for like the year before. I mean, don't get me wrong, like,
Air quality is equivalent to Boston's air quality. And that is insane. That is just crazy. From what, 3 weeks?
Wow.
So I think that the one thing that this is doing is it's sort of fighting back on what we've been sold for the past 50, 60 years as in this capitalist society, that it's about saving money, it's about cash, it's about the end dollar, it's about not about time, it's about savings, it's about money, it's about doing all this. And I'm hopeful that in the back end of this, we're going to be more centered as humans. We're going to understand ourselves, because everybody can't avoid that inner turmoil right now. Yep. And so hopefully people are dealing with it. And as we step out, as a species, I think we're going to hug each other. And I think it's as lame as that sounds, because I'm a cynic, I think that we're going to come out and start hugging and kissing each other. And I think that's a really important thing, you know?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think honestly, it's a little early to make predictions, but my hope is, well, I do believe that this is a global reset button, that, we as humans couldn't do it. So the earth said, all right, time out. And yeah, I agree with you, Mike. And it's my hope that, we come through this with a completely refreshed set of values, and different perspectives, and just a different view on the world, and empathy and kindness and all of that. I totally agree with you. And I kind of feel a responsibility, because we have this awareness, right? We're talking about it. We're aware of it. We have this responsibility to do what we can to actually make that happen. You know what I mean? It's like, create that future. Don't hope for it. Just make it happen, because we can. And maybe that sounds a little sappy, but that's the optimist in me. And I believe that we could do that. So
I don't think it's sappy. And let me just say that me making that statement is a new thing.
Come here, you.
Which I think speaks volumes. All right. Well, I totally love. What I really like to see is that in this conversation, like, things like positivity and empathy have been things that have kind of been like a driving force throughout it. So I think that speaks to kind of what you guys are saying. I do think we should probably start wrapping it up a little bit. I want to end it with, what is the one thing that you are most excited for once this is all over? Anything, but I see the smile over there on Mike's face, and I know it's just running out. I know it's the bar. It's got to be the bar safari, right?
Oh yeah, maybe it's a bar safari. Like, it would be cool. It'd be cool if it was something like that. Like, yeah, dude. Honestly, if I could, which, being a freelancer, I won't be able to afford to. But if I could throw a party that was, 1,000 strong, I'd do it. And I think that would be the most fun. Really, I really look forward to, like, getting lost with other people. And that's what my job is. My job is to get lost with folks and be empathetic with people and understand people's stories and be able to retell those stories. And this thing, even though this is great, I'm staring at blue light and pixels.
Yeah, not the same.
Like, your terrible framing.
Such a filmmaker.
So, I can't wait for that, man. I can't wait to just be out. That's what I want. It's just to be out and around people and to laugh and have fun.
I'm 100% behind you there. What about you, Brett?
Yeah, similar. I have in-laws that live pretty closely, and we've done some grocery shopping. They're older and we want to make sure that they're able to stay inside. So we went grocery shopping for them last week, and we pull up, and we text them to open up their garage and load the groceries in there, and it's just one you know, you never know how long people are going to be around, and not being able to go out on their back porch and go in their home and talk to them. There's just this like distance that's built into everything now. So yeah, similar to Mike, just looking forward to being able to pull up to a friend's house and have, you know, friends back over our house. Our house has been so quiet. We've usually got kids' friends running in and out of it day in and day out. It just feels so spookily quiet right now that just everything's quiet. The streets are quiet. The stores are quiet. Our house is quiet. So yeah, just some semblance of normalcy in terms of like friends and family is what I'm looking forward to the most.
And I think we've talked about we've talked about how things won't go back to normal, and how it almost in kind of a negative way. But I think that things won't go back to normal in a positive way too, in that like we now kind of, Mike, you were talking about this a lot, that we now are more grateful for those interactions that we used to have. And so I think it'll bring back, not only will we be able to go back to those normal interactions, but we'll be so much more grateful for them once we're actually more appreciative of those interactions when we go back to them. So yeah, I'm
definitely
the same thing.
Yep, 100%.
On the same boat, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I want to grab my kids and my wife, and I want to get out and see friends. I want to see family. I want to travel. I'm going to go see cultures that I never saw before, and I just want to get back out in the world.
Seriously, come next year, I think I need to book myself, like my family and I, like we're going to Europe or something.
Exactly. Exactly.
Embrace
it all.
We're making it happen.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, all right. Yeah, I'd say let's man, Mike, ever since you said throwing that party, all I can think about is like what NAB is going to be like next year.
One big barbecue in the desert.
It's just going to be insane next year. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. A bunch of different manufacturers that I've been talking to that had all this new stuff that they wanted to drop, and they can't drop because of this stuff. So it's interesting.
It is cool to see the way that they're kind of innovating now, though, and finding new ways to announce those things. Like Maxon is doing, like they're doing an entirely online, I think it's like Cinema 4D Live or something like that.
Yeah.
So just
like show,
taking the same thing and then just putting it out in front of the masses. I mean, honestly, why not? Instead of just this small group that you would actually meet there at the show, you have the entire worworld there at your fingertips. So
what makes you wonder? Will NAB still exist?
It very much makes you wonder. Yeah.
Right?
Because I don't think that you can totally replace like all the parties, like because there's so much relationship building that happens out there, all the like kind of the satellite events around the main event.
Sure.
But yeah, when it comes to like all the product showcases and all that, I mean, I've seen other companies that are literally doing like physical, like they would put their booth together.
It's such a weird time for content because you have everybody that needs it. You have everybody that doesn't want to spend quiet time. So they're trying to fill time with as much content as they possibly can. So now I think for the first couple of weeks, it was fascinating because people were just like, I don't know what to watch. And so then they were just sort of dumping themselves into these different outlets. Yeah. I'd be curious to see what rises to the top. Like, did you hear about, I'm sure you guys have heard about Quibi, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Quibi spent all this loot to make a platform that would be perfect for the bus ride to work. So like we're gonna have like top of the line actors, we're gonna have all these people come in and we're gonna create this content specifically timed out so that way when you're waiting in line at the bathroom, you'll be able to watch an episode of this stuff. And now people have all the time in the world to watch stuff. So it's not been doing that well. And so I'm curious to see what the new outlet is and like how much time people are spending doing this stuff. Like I just downloaded, what is the program that's this new, it's not new, it's new to me. This is me just being a butt about it. But Discord. So I just downloaded Discord, and with the podcast, what I'm going to try to do is set up with fans, and then I'm going to screen really rare movies through the internet and have conversations with that. And that's going to be something that we try this weekend. And I think that's going to become an outlet. It's almost like renting out a movie theater and screening movies again. So
my kids are on Discord all
Yeah.
day, every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like,
You want a glimpse of the future. Look at what your kids are doing.
Pretty seriously, actually.
very true, my man. Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, they always say go into a middle school and ask them what apps and what tools they're using. You'll
Yeah.
be blown away.
Yeah, they're like Twitter.
Yeah. Email, Facebook.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. Email.
No. TikTok.
Yeah.
TikTok.
Everything's TikTok, man. It's just TikTok all day.
Oof. I feel like such a 40-something-year-old. TikTok. Oof.
Oh, don't lie, Mike. Come on, give us your account.
What's that?
I said, give us your account. It's got to be out there. I
Oh,
know
my
you're
TikTok account?
you're a big TikTok influencer, right?
No. I've been doing Instagram live stuff, and I feel like I was so late on that. So, no, man, that's not my thing. Yeah.
All right. Well,
I'm keeping it really PG. That's why I'm delaying everything I say, because normally I would say a bunch of different
oh sure.
but yeah.
I'm very impressed. I didn't know you had a PG filter.
It's like someone's got a gun to my head off to the side here.
Right.
That's how it works.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me, and thank you to everyone listening to take some time out of your day to listen to us get up on our soapbox. Hopefully you found something of value out of this, and definitely let us know if there's any other ideas that you might have about forms of content that we can make, or if you have any ideas of like how we can other topics we can talk about in this kind of format. And I'm sure that we'll be doing more of this in the future, because what other choice do we have? So with that, have a great rest of your day, and stay home and stay safe.